There's a famous quote here. This is from Columbus. He says, "Immortal thanks should be rendered to God, who had brought his labor such prosperous issues, that Jesus Christ rejoices and triumphs on earth no less than in heaven at the approaching salvation of nations innumerable that were before hastening to destruction." So, I mean, this shows that he's a man of faith. He loves Jesus Christ,
Well,
and he wants these people to know
one of
Jesus.
the what people don't understand is that what Columbus was attempting to do was a response to the Muslim takeover of the Holy Land in the 1400s, which had just happened. Remember, the sack of Constantinople was just a few decades prior to
Yeah,
1492.
1453.
1453. So 1453 to 1492. And yet people, for some reason, don't think about all of these things in context. Obviously, the Protestant Reformation is just a few years after this as well, which plays a later role in things and sort of the foundation of the New World, obviously. And so you get this situation where Columbus, his goal was never to discover new land. If you read his actual writings, his journals, he's almost obsessive over two things. Number one, spreading the word of Jesus Christ, and number two, retaking the Holy Land and liberating the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. He's constantly writing about this. In fact, he went from monarch to monarch throughout Eastern and Western Europe, and then finally finds Ferdinand and Isabella, who out of Spain, who decide to go with this. Well, what did he say to them? He said, "We will discover gold and then use this gold to return to launch a new crusade to retake the Church of the Holy Sepulchre." This is his specific reason for traveling, his specific reason for doing what he did. And I think people also need to go into the context, right? You know, we have these satellites and GPS systems, and Elon Musk has Starlink up, and we can see the world as it is today, but Columbus couldn't. You know, Columbus couldn't see any of that. There was just a vast ocean where people said, "Hey, don't go over there." And so Columbus is sailing without any idea other than faith. And there were some clues. There'd been some pottery and some artifacts that had washed up on the Canary Islands, some bodies here and there that explorers would come back with. That one of the phrases was they were neither European nor African nor Asian, so they weren't sure what specifically this was, but they knew they had some indications there might be something further. There might be something out there. And Columbus also, of course, we know that he uses the word. I'm going to say it, all right? I know we're going to be a lot of trouble on this one. He used the word Indian because he said that he was trying to discover the Indies. And the reason for the name of Cuba, for example, being called Cuba, he was looking for Kublai Khan because he wanted to form an alliance with the great Khan, again, with Christianity, because he knew Christianity was welcome at the time, right? This also ties, by the way, China into Columbus, because he was attempting to meet with the ruler of China at the time, Kublai Khan, who, by the way, was Mongolian, the descendant of the Yuan. So this is the Yuan dynasty. So the descendants of Genghis Khan were controlling China at this time.
Who had Christians in their court, didn't they?
Had Christians in the
Khans,
court. That's right.
The Khans did.
And Columbus knew this.
Yep.
Right. So Columbus knew this, and he thought that if he could, and obviously being Italian, the story of Marco Polo, etc., he thought he could sort of be a new Marco Polo, meet with the Khans, form an alliance to go from the East and the West back to the Middle East, and then retake the Holy Land. This was Columbus's grand design. Just turned out that there was another continent in the way. But when you talk about the man's motivations and the history behind this, by the way, he, to a great extent, even after discovering the first couple islands, still thought that he was in the Indies. He had no clue that it wasn't actually the one. He said, "Well, where's that empire that I was looking for?" It took considerable amount of time to find that out. But so for people to understand that he had these grand designs and he had this spirit of adventure, that spirit of exploration that's been so stripped from modern society. This idea that you could be an explorer. He autodidact, by the way, didn't serve in any of the navies of the time. Spent some time as a civilian sailor. That's about it. You know, sailed essentially by star charts, which is, by the way, something that our Navy doesn't do anymore because we're so reliant on GPS.
My grandfather taught star navigation at the Naval Academy and at Harvard.
They're starting to bring it back.
Oh,
because they've recognized that this is a major vulnerability for our modern Navy. That if GPS gets shut off and you're basically blind out there. So we have to go back to learning some of these methods that have been completely lost to us. Because if one, they've talked about using laser devices to take out these satellites, or if they can just disrupt the connection, then your
Right.
GPS is down, etc. Satellite warfare is a huge thing. So all of these things that go into modern warfare, as we're looking at today on the ground and geopolitics, they actually did play an even greater role for Columbus because he didn't have any of that stuff because of his devotion to Christ and his adventurous nature. This nature, and it's a very masculine nature too, that they've tried to just strip away from society today. He embraced all of those things and pushed into it based really on faith alone. You read about Magellan, right, the first circumnavigator, and it's the same idea that I will go and I will challenge myself. I'll challenge the crew. The crew almost mutinied on Columbus, by the way. They almost killed him.
Yeah.
And you read about this in his journals, and he took it out of the Bible. He said, well, if I haven't found land in 3 days, then do what you want with me. 3 days, right? You know where he got that from. We all know where he got that from. And so on the third day, they actually did sight land. And this was months after they thought that he would have crossed over. And people also don't know that he almost didn't make it back. The ship almost crashed on the way back, of simply navigating his way across, finding it there, making it back all in one piece. Obviously, losing men, losing ships, everything along the way. The whole story is incredible. I mean, it's something that I remember as a young boy reading novels about Columbus, being taught. It was I guess the 500th anniversary when I was in school. And so I remember Columbus being taught as this great hero who was responsible, by the way, more than any one other singular individual, responsible for the founding of the United States of America. And when you look at the agenda against Columbus, that's really what it's about. It's about stripping away his accomplishments, stripping away the foundation of the United States of America, getting us to believe that our country was founded in some evil, horrid, and sinful way, and then using that to usurp the power of the structures I talked about before, Roman law, Western civilization, our philosophy, to take away all of those things because he's just some dead white man, dead white oppressor, and take away all the accomplishments and all the things that we've done. They're trying to undermine our civilization. You see this with the takedown of statues. However, I will say, as a native of the Philadelphia area, we are very proud of the fact that in South Philadelphia, that is one of the few places in the entire country where a statue of Christopher Columbus still stands, even though it was targeted by all the same forces of 2020 that you saw, BLM, Antifa, etc. They didn't get that one because the people of South Philadelphia, predominantly Italian American, all banded together and stood vigil. In some cases, hundreds of these guys standing outside that statue for days and nights before the city finally stood down.
Yep.
Our founding fathers, they named our capital district based on Columbus, the District of Columbia that comes from Columbus, the country of Columbia, British Columbia, Columbia University. I recently found, by the way, I threw this up on Twitter the other day, and I saw people in my comments saying, "Well, no, that's not based on Columbus. That's based on this ancient goddess called Columbia." I said, "That's not an ancient goddess. What are you talking about?" Or we can talk about ancient gods and goddesses. That's another podcast. But Columbia was a personification of America that was created in the 18th century as a way to, kind of like Britannia was for Great Britain at the time. And it was simply just a personification of the country. And so America almost had the name Columbia. But obviously, all of this was based on Christopher Columbus. And so if our founding fathers could look to this history as a way of adventure, if you give that to any 12, 13-year-old boy and tell them that this was done and we could find this type of adventure, that's the kind of spirit that we should be inculcating. That's the kind of faith we should be inculcating. That's certainly how I've been raising my kids and how I'm going to teach them.
Yep. And when you have in the 1800s, you have a lot of these riots in Philadelphia. There was riots against the Catholics. There was this sort of anti-Irish, anti-Italian move saying, Catholics aren't truly American. And the priests were smart. And this is why we have the Knights of Columbus. It's named Knights of Columbus. The priest said, no. Christopher Columbus was a Catholic. The whole American story begins with the Catholic Church, Spain, an Italian Catholic, Christopher Columbus. So don't let people tell you that if you're a Catholic, you're not truly American, because past the founding fathers, you got Columbus. He's a Catholic. And that was a great source of pride for Americans who maybe felt like they were ostracized or not really part of the Catholic experiment or American experiment, is we had Columbus.